At 10:31, a single contact appears on the radar display of USS Bulkley, and the officer of the watch classifies it in 4 seconds. See skimming contact bearing 087, range 181 kilometers, speed 880 kilometers per hour, altitude 8 m above the water surface. In the Combat Information Center of the USS Gerald Ford, Lieutenant Nathan Cross looks at the contact and feels something. He has been waiting 3 days to feel. He already knows what it is. He already knows where it came from. He already knows it is not alone. He has known all of this for 36 hours. And for 36 hours, nobody has listened. To understand what Iran fired at the Gerald Ford this afternoon, you need to understand where the Gerald Ford is and why that matters more than any weapon Iran has ever pointed at her. The Gerald Ford is not in the Arabian Sea. She isn't conducting flight operations. She isn't launching aircraft or tracking threats or doing any of the things that a most powerful carrier ever built was designed to do. She is anchored 41 miles south of Crete in the eastern Mediterranean Sea, undergoing emergency repairs to her electromagnetic aircraft launch system. Damage sustained during sustained combat operations in the Arabian Sea that degraded 3 of her 4 catapults and forced her temporary withdrawal from Operation Epic Fury. She has been in this position for 4 days, stationary, anchored, unable to maneuver at full speed. Flight operations suspended. Her carrier air wing reduced to 40% strength. The remainder transferred to the Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea to maintain strike operations against Iran during the Gerald Ford's repair period. Her escort formation is reduced to 2 destroyers, USS Bulkley to the east, USS Mitchell Toth north. The other escorts reassigned to the Abraham Lincoln Strike Group weeks ago when the repair period began. 2 destroyers and 1 carrier that cannot move. Sitting in the same position it has occupied for 96 hours in open water off the coast of Greece. Iran had been watching her for all 96 of those hours. The Sumar is Iran's longest-range cruise missile, 2,500 kilometers of range, that a turbo and engine that produces minimal infrared signature. A terrain-following guidance system that keeps the missile exactly 50 m above the ground throughout its entire overland flight below the radar horizon of every ground-based radar system in the region, invisible to airborne early warning aircraft, looking down at terrain clutter, undetectable by any system that relies on line of sight to find its targets. Iran fired it from a launch facility in eastern Iran 2 hours and 17 minutes ago. It has been flying through rocky airspace across Syria and through southern Turkey at 50 m altitude the entire time, threading valleys, skimming ridge lines, hugging the earth with the precision of a guidance system that has been refined over 20 years of Iranian missile development. No radar has seen it. No system has tracked it. No warning has been generated anywhere in the theater. It dropped to sea skimming altitude 8 m above the Mediterranean at 1429 and appeared on Bulkley's radar at 1431. Range 100 to 81 kilometers. Time to impact in the Gerald Ford's hull at current speed 18 minutes and 44 seconds. A carrier that cannot move has 18 minutes and 44 seconds of warning against a missile that has already completed 93% of its flight undetected. Lieutenant Nathan Cross had been watching the Gerald Ford's passive sensor display for 3 days. Cross is the Gerald Ford Signals Intelligence Officer. His job: ice electronic emissions, tracking every radar, every communication signal, every electronic transmission in the theater, and building a picture of what those signals mean. He has been doing this job for 9 years, and he is very good at it. He is good enough that 3 days ago, on the first full day of the Gerald Ford's repair period, he noticed something in the passive sensor data that nobody else in. The formation had flagged a Turkish civilian air traffic control radar installation on the southern coast of Turkey. The Antalya Secondary Surveillance Radar, a facility he knew from its emission profile as well as heck knew his own display, had been experiencing brief intermittent signal disruptions, not failures, disruptions. 0.8 second gaps in the radar's normal emission pattern occurring at irregular intervals throughout the day. Cross logged the first disruption at 9:14 on D1, then another at 10:01, then 10:48, then 11:35, then 12:22. He stared at those timestamps for 4 minutes before he understood what they were telling him. 47 minutes, 47 minutes, 47 minutes, 47 minutes. The disruptions were occurring at exactly 47-minute intervals. That a 0.88-second disruption in a ground-based radar's emission pattern at exactly 47-minute intervals is not atmospheric interference. Atmospheric interference is random. It does not keep a schedule. It does not occur at 47-minute intervals across a 14-hour period with the precision of a metronome. A 0.8-second disruption at exactly a 47-minute intervals is an object passing through the radar's coverage zone at 50 m altitude, briefly shadowing the radar zone emissions as it transits, creating a 0.8-second gap in the return signal that a radar's own processing interprets as noise and filters out automatically. An object flying at 880 km per hour at 50 m altitude would transit the Antalya radar's coverage zone in approximately 0.8 seconds. Cross had filed his first report at 17:31 on day 1. He described the disruption pattern, the interval, the bearing of the Antalya radar's coverage zone, and his assessment that the disruptions were consistent with a cruise missile in terrain following flight on a heading that if extended westward across the Mediterranean terminated at the Gerald Ford's anchored position. The report came back at 1914 logged and noted with no further action required. The duty intelligence officer had assessed the disruptions as consistent with routine radar maintenance cycling. Cross filed a second report on day 2 with 11 hours off additional data. 14 more disruptions, same interval, same bearing, same 0.8-second duration. The pattern had not deviated once in 25 disruptions across 2 days. The second report came back at 11:30 logged and noted. Cross looked at the response for 3 seconds. Then he went back to his display and kept watching. Because routine radar maintenance cycling does not occur at 47-minute intervals for 48 consecutive hours without a single deviation. And because the bearing of the Antalya radar's coverage zone still terminated at the Gerald Ford's anchored position when he extended it westward across the Mediterranean. And because something about a 47-minute interval across 48 hours of continuous data would not leave him alone no matter how many times it came back logged and noted. On day 3, started calculating if an object had been causing those disruptions at 47-minute intervals for 3 days flying at 880 kmh at 50 m altitude on a consistent bearing. It was not one object. One object causes one disruption then nothing. Multiple objects on a sequential launch schedule, each one fired 47 minutes after the previous one, each one following the same terrain-hugging route at the same speed, cause exactly the pattern he had been watching for 3 days. One disruption every 47 minutes, because one missile was passing through the Antalya radar's coverage zone every 47 minutes. He counted the disruptions across 3 days. 92 disruptions, 92 intervals of exactly 47 minutes. Not one SUMAR. 92 SUMARs fired sequentially over 72 hours from the same launch facility on the same bearing at same speed. Each one 47 minutes behind the previous one. Each one following the same terrain-hugging route through Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. Each one invisible to every radar in the region. Each one heading for the same stationary target. Iran was not trying to overwhelm the Gerald Ford with a simultaneous salvo. Iran was trying to exhaust her. 2 destroyers with finite interceptor magazines, a carrier that cannot move. 92 missiles arriving one at a time every 47 minutes for the next 71 hours. Each one forcing the destroyers to expend interceptors. Each one bringing the magazine closer to zero. Each one arriving at a precisely known time from a precisely known bearing until eventually one missile arrives, and there is nothing left to stop it. Cross had filed his third report at 6 o'clock that morning with the full calculation. 92 missiles, sequential launches, 47-minute intervals, projected intercept resource exhaustion at missile 31. Request immediate strike authorization on the launch facility at the following coordinates. The report had come back at 10:47. Coordinates logged. Strike authorization request escalated to 5th Fleet for review. At 14:31, the first SUMAR appeared on Bulkley's radar 181 km to the east. Cross was already on the circuit to the Combat Information Center before the contact report had finished transmitting. He told Rear Admiral David Mercer everything in 44 seconds. The disruption pattern, the 47-minute interval, the sequential launch calculation, the 92 missile projection, the intercept resource exhaustion at missile 31, the launch facility coordinates he had been refining for 36 hours. Mercer looked at the contact on his display. 181 km, 18 minutes and 44 seconds to impact, 1 contact. He authorized the intercept and told Cross his targeting package was being transmitted to 5th Fleet immediately. USS Bulkley fired 2 SM-2 interceptors at 14:33. The fire control solution on a sea skimming contact at this range was marginal. The SUMAR was flying at 8 m above the water inside the radar clutter zone, where sea return makes target discrimination difficult at long range. The first SM-2 lost track in the sea clutter and detonated 340 m from the missile. The second SM-2 reached its intercept point and detonated 18 m from the SUMAR's airframe. The fragmentation pattern from the SM-2's warhead struck the missile's left wing assembly and engine, damaging the wing, degrading the terrain-following guidance system by approximately 40% and reducing the engine's thrust output. The SUMAR continued inbound, damaged, flight path becoming erratic as the degraded guidance system struggled to maintain consistent altitude. Speed reduced to 720 kmh, but still flying, still closing in a carrier that could not move. USS Mitchell fired 2 SM-2s at 14:38 as the SUMAR entered her engagement envelope. The erratic flight path made fire control solution building difficult. The missile was no longer flying a predictable trajectory, and the Aegis fire control computer was having to continuously update its intercept calculations as the SUMAR's path changed. The first SM-2 missed by 140 ms. The missile executed an unplanned altitude change caused by the damaged guidance system. The second SM-2 detonated 31 m from the airframe, more damage to the wing, more degradation to the guidance system. The SUMAR began a slow, uncontrolled descent toward the water surface. At 3.1 nautical miles, the SUMAR's damaged guidance system pulled it back up from 2 m above the water to 15 m. an overcorrection that exposed the missile briefly above the sea clutter zone and gave the Gerald Ford's own phalanx a clean acquisition. The phalanx fired at 1446, 500 rounds per minute, tracking atom-aged seconding contact at 3.1 nautical miles. The burst reached the intercept point at the same moment the SUMAR's damaged guidance system pulled it into another altitude change. 60% of the rounds missed. The remaining 40% struck the missile's forward section and warhead assembly. The SUMAR's 400 warhead detonated 187 meters from the Gerald Ford's island superstructure. Not a clean miss, not a direct hit. 187 m. The blast from a 400 kilograms warhead detonating in the air 187 from a carrier's island generates a pressure wave and fragmentation pattern that covers 187 m in approximately 0.04 seconds. The fragments that reached the Gerald Ford's island superstructure were traveling at over 800 meters per second when they impacted. They were not large fragments. The SM-2 hits and the phalanx burst had broken the warhead into smaller pieces before detonation. But smaller fragments at 800 meters per second through the island superstructure's exterior plating are not harmless. 16 crew members were injured, 3 seriously. The 2 SPY-6 antenna arrays on the island's eastern face sustained fragment damage that degraded their detection capability by 31%. One communications antenna was destroyed. A fire broke out in a storage compartment in the island's 4th level and was extinguished in 6 minutes and 44 seconds. The Gerald Ford had been hit, not by the missile directly, by what was left of it after 4 interceptors and a phalanx burst had broken it apart 187 short of the hull. In the Combat Information Center, Mercer looked at the damage report on his secondary display, 16 casualties, radar degradation, 1 fire extinguished, the carrier operational, but hurt. Then he looked at this interceptor count. 4 SM-2 expended on 1 missile, 2 destroyers, finite magazines. Cross's calculation sitting on his display telling him the next missile would arrive in 46 minutes and 12 seconds. And the one after that 47 minutes after that, and the one after that, and the one after that 91 more times. He picked up the circuit to Cross's position. How confident are you in the launch facility coordinates? Cross looked at his display at 72-hour soft disruption data, at 92 intervals of exactly 47 minutes at the bearing calculation he had been refining. Since day 1, confident enough to file 3 reports. Sir, Mercer was quiet for 3 seconds. Then he picked up the 5th Fleet Circuit. The USS George H.W. Bush Carrier Strike Group had completed its composite training exercise 3 weeks ago and was operating in the eastern Mediterranean 380 kilometers east of the Gerald Ford within Tomahawk range of eastern Iran. Rear Admiral Alexis Walker received Mercer's strike request and Cross's targeting package at 1449. She looked at the coordinates. She looked at the 72-hour disruption timeline Cross had attached. She looked at the 92 missile projection and the intercept resource exhaustion calculation. She authorized the strike at 14:51:16 BGM 109. Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from the George H.W. Bush's vertical launch cells at 14:52. Flight time to target 2 hours and 9 minutes. At 15:18, the second SUMAR appeared on Bulkley's radar. Cross's calculation had projected its arrival at 15:18 exactly. The intercept ran 2 SM-2S, same marginal sea skimming geometry, same difficult fire control solution, both missiles expended. The SUMAR destroyed 2.4 nautical miles from the Gerald Ford. Clean kill this time. Now fragments reached the hull. At 16:05, the third SUMAR appeared. Cross's projections 6,005.2 more SM-2S clean intercept at 4.1 nautical miles. At 16:52, the fourth, 2 SM-2S, clean intercept. At 17:39, the fifth, 1 SM-2 miss, 1 SM-2 kill at 1.8 nautical miles. At 17:44, the Tomahawks reached the Iranian launch facility in eastern Iran. Cross's coordinates refined over 72 hours of passive sensor analysis to within 400 meters of the actual facility had been updated continuously by the George H.W. Bush targeting systems during the 2-hour and 9-minute flight using signals intelligence data. Cross continued transmitting as each new SUMAR appeared in radar and confirmed the launch bearing. The first Tomahawk impacted at 17:44, the second through 16th over the following 31 seconds. The launch facility, the rails, the missile storage bunkers, the targeting systems, the fuel depot, the crew ceased to exist between 17:44 and 17:44 and 31 seconds. At 18:26, the sixth SUMAR appeared on radar. Cross's projection 18:26. 2 SM-2s launched from Bulkley. The missile was destroyed at 3.8 nautical miles. The 7th SUMAR never launched. The 8th never launched. The 9th through the 92 never launched. The facility that had been firing every 47 minutes for 72 hours fired for the last time at Missile 6 at 18:26 and was already a smoking crater in eastern Iran when that missile appeared on radar. In the Signals Intelligence Suite, Cross wrote his engagement log in 3 sentences. Iranian launch facility fired 92 Shimmer cruise missiles on a 47-minute sequential launch schedule over 72 hours. 6 reached the Gerald Ford's engagement envelope. The facility was destroyed before the seventh launch. Iran attacked the USS Gerald Ford while she was under repair. A carrier that could not maneuver, could not launch aircraft, could not evade. A carrier with 2 destroyers, a degraded radar picture, and finite interceptors against 92 missiles designed to arrive one at a time until nothing was left to stop them. 6 missiles reached the engagement envelope. 1 got close enough to injure 16 crew members and damage 2 radar arrays. The other 5 were destroyed cleanly by a formation that knew exactly when each one was coming and exactly where it was coming from, because a signals intelligence officer had been watching a Turkish radar's 0.8-second disruption pattern for 72 hours. And nobody had listened until the first missile was already on the display. America's response traveled to 500 km in 2 hours and 9 minutes, 16 Tomahawks, 31 seconds. Everything Iran had built to exhaust the Gerald Ford, 1 missile at a time gone before the 7th missile could launch. And the lesson Throne took home from the Mediterranean that afternoon was the only at least wanted to learn. That the most dangerous officer on a wounded carrier is not the one managing the weapons. It is the one who noticed the 47-minute gap on day 1 and never stopped counting.